to Roysambu, where we are at the moment. And what has happened is that even the police officers who are containing them in Githurai, they have had to move back. And at the moment, what is happening is that the young people who have come all the way from Githurai are actually working with police officers now in Roysambu. There is some bit of calm at the moment. But what we know is that we have a group of youth from Githurai 45 who are battling with the police officers, and we also have another group that's from Roysambu area. Where we are at the Ayub is that we have the Roysambu roundabout. For us at Ayub, we are on top of on that road, just the bridge crossing over to Githurai, but also actually, there's a bit of action, and also down police officers from Katarani police station are also battling protesters from Roysambu area. But at the moment, the police have been able to repulse those who are agitated coming all the way from Githurai. And at the moment, the situation is calm. But we have a number of police officers who are still keeping tabs and ensuring that the protesters are not able to cross over this side and be able to access the central business district. From where I am, that is near, as you head towards Safari Park Hotel, there's a police lorry there with police officers who also just ensuring that those who are not supposed to cross over to the other side are not allowed to cross over to the other side. So at the moment, where we are, this is now like the area where there has been a battlefield for about an hour, but now the situation is a bit calm. But we don't know what could happen in the next few minutes, So we are here, we are keeping tabs, and we'll be able to inform our viewers of what will be happening.
Thank you, and good afternoon. He is along Thika Road, keeping an eye on the situation there of the very many roadblocks that have been mounted by the security agencies in staving off the protesters from accessing Nairobi Central Business District. Kidi, coming to you. Prof has mentioned the aspect of the attainment, some of the objectives that were attained in 1990, which was multipartyism and the set of other changes that came with the struggle at the time. But today's struggle seems a whole different ballgame, especially the mechanisms, the people who are leading it, and the goals that they want achieved. Then, in terms of drawing a line, how is this equally going to be historic in its own way in attaining the objectives that's much needed in today's constitutional democracy?
Prof teaches law. And
thank you for the like.
Yes, he is reminding us that not economics. But I think that we must agree, Prof must agree that when you come to definition of development, what is development? It cannot be brick and mortar, as Amartya Sen, and he knows Amartya Sen very well, says that development cannot be brick and mortar. The development that Prof is pointing out, that I don't know, we have SGR and Expressway, is brick and mortar. Well, what that does is that it increases the bottom lines for the owners of the capital. But for the who are almost in Kenya, the owners of capital are almost 1%, at maximum 3% of the population. That means that you have up to about 95% of the population struggling under the weight of debt, of poverty, of sickness. Today, as we speak, the SGR has blended the economy into debt, while at the same time, it has also undermined the economic vitality of the nation. If you look at SGR, at the expressway, you must first ask yourself that what were the other alternatives that could have been, that we could have gone for as a country. If you look at the place of the ordinary people, because mass prosperity must begin with productivity. And areas of William Ruto to bring up the productive capacity of the people. And when there is nothing intelligent to point at, then that is where then when you see the protest, then you are tempted to sit back and say that these young people have a reason to be in the streets.
The security is everywhere.
Why we forsake our individual sovereignty and submit it to a governor, to someone to then exercise it in our best interest. Recently, when the president was, I think, in one of the countries, either in the west or the east, I think it was in China,
Yes.
he ridiculed Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda as primitive economies. But they might only be lagging behind, in fact, because of their history. That history today, if you look at where we are, if we don't get our act right, Tanzania and Uganda and these other small countries in the region will laugh at us. We are a strategic geopolitical asset that should have helped us to leapfrog into the future in terms of development. So then, part of where I disagree with the Prof is that the political class should have prioritized the things like access to Article 43, the rights and in the Article 43 of the Constitution. Today, almost all of those rights envisaged in Article 43 have collapsed completely. People are just managing by. So I think that today, as we are here today, we must prick the conscience of the political class that please, because you exercise the sovereignty of the people, ensure that people have a reason to say that they belong to this country. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Prof.
Yes. I think Kidi Mwaga is here courtesy of Sabasaba. So, and that's why he has this free speech. He can pontificate on these great ideas because of Sabasaba. But that tells you how far Kenya has come from. Development-wise, and I still maintain that we are far much a better country than the rest, perhaps even than the West. People think at the standards of the paragons of achievement and virtue. Kenya, we are doing a great deal more in terms of lifting the conditions of our people. And that is development. Development is not only economistic, it's also a transformation in the quality of life of a human being, a human person. We have what we call free primary education program that is working for our people. I'm a product of government redistribution programs. The government gave me a university education funding, including at the master's level. And this tells you so that Kenya, we are doing so much. We are doing better than many people. Okay? We have a cash transfer program that goes to Wazee, people who are above 80 years
David
old.
Otieno, he too. How are you, David?
Subsidies. There is what we call explanatory nationalism. The way in which
Please
we may
subscribe
want
my
to
YouTube
explain
channel.
all our problems from our own perspective, from our own failures. But then we do not associate those failures from
Make
factors
sure you
that perhaps
subscribe
are
my YouTube
external
channel.
and that are international. Economic struggles or economic strains that a country may face, that a country may live through, has got several causes. Some of them could be national causes. For instance, the way we manage our economy, the way we do our budgeting, or budgeting misallocations and misdirections. But there could also be other factors that come, or international factors that impact our governance, including how we run our economy. And I think that's why when we talk about Sabasaba, we're talking about elevated freedoms. The fact that we can come here and inject new ideas into our governance structures, governance institutions, so that we can challenge the proposal that the government may want to push through. And I think it is a good thing. It is a good thing. We are on a learning curve. We are on a learning trajectory. And I still believe that Kenya is transforming incrementally. Development is incremental. It cannot be spontaneous. It cannot happen in a single day. Okay. Kenya is a far better country. There are good roads in the rural areas. In our places where there are no roads as of 1990 or as of 2000, passable roads. It tells you that development, which is mortar and brick, is also transforming lives in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
But there's also the quality aspect of development, such as giving people a good education.
Okay.
All these things we are learning and transform change is coming incrementally.
Yeah, and Prof, because before we go to Kidi, this is important to point. Then what the young people are decrying is the lack of economic opportunities and the inability to be absorbed. For example, let's just talk about elite capture of Kenya. Because I'm looking at a report by World Bank, which was released in 2020, titled Elite Capture of Foreign Aid in Kenya, which had assessed between 1990 and 2010. So it's covered Moi's last 2 terms and Kibaki's, of course, administration. And the Kenyan politicians and their accomplices stole over 360 billion Kenya shillings over 20 years, which is 18 billion every year, 1.5 billion every month, and 50 million every day, and 2 million Kenya shillings every single hour. Then let's come to the Jubilee Party, which was then the administration that took over. And you have it's child's play, basically, because looking at the National Assembly's report on the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, tabled in the House in October 2019, over 2 financial years, 16-17, 17-18, the National Treasury released 120 billion to fund the construction of 8 megadams in the country, none of which has come and may never see the light of the day. And this mathematically broken down is worse than even what Kanu did, Kibaki. 21 billion on Aror Kimore dams alone. And it then mathematically means we have been losing 5 billion every month, 1.7 billion every day, and 70 million Kenya shillings.
Make sure you like my
After the
video,
Jubilee Party.
kindly please
This is
like
an
my
issue today
my
which
live.
is justifiable, is it, in the face
Like,
of the reforms that young people are calling for, proper
kindly
financial
make
management.
sure you subscribe.
Indeed, that's enormous. I mean, those figures are baffling. They're actually earth-shattering. Kenyans, of course, have a very good explanation for this. It is a governance problem. You know, those leakages that happen on an hourly basis, on a daily basis, is because of the loopholes that we have within our institutions. And by the way, corruption is a cultural problem. It's a culture. It is ingrained. It is innate in the psyche of government institutions, in the psyche of government officers. It is true, and I do agree, that the scale at which the public is losing its funds, its revenue, its resources is enormous. But let's look at the system that enables this. What are the systems that enables this culture? Part of it is domestic, but also part of it is international. In fact, they're saying the international system, financial systems, is the one that enables Kenya's corruption, because this money perhaps finds its way elsewhere because of the international system that enables capital flight or flight of people investing in other parts of the world. Why is it that we have an international system, an international financial regime that enables Kenyans to invest elsewhere without questioning how that money has been obtained? That's why we need to start the conversation. Why is it that all these governors are now finding it very comfortable to invest in countries in Dubai and all those tax havens? It is because of an international system. What if we do not have it? Why are they not investing this money in Kenya? So I think that's why I want to run away from what we call explanatory nationalism. Yeah. Explaining our problems only from within our own country, national factors, while forgetting about the international factors that enables. So let's question also the international regime. We can always deal with our problems in our own way within the legal system that we have fashioned, that we have crafted. But somebody has to deal with the international system that enables all this.
Yeah. In the short term, though, we can deal with the domestic problem, is it, that we strengthen our institutions, including the legal system that you have said. But then how do we attain that when the political system and the bureaucracy fights the judiciary? You have seen the wars between former CJ David Kenani Maraga and the Uhuru Kenyatta administration. And 2024 began by President William Ruto and the Kenya Kwanza leadership, using even some unprintable language, it's like a language against the judiciary. How then do we do that when there is growing antagonism and financial incapacitation of such institutions, which ought to be holding the leaders who misappropriate these funds to account?
I think our institutions continue to evolve, they continue to grow and grow stronger. From the year 2013, when Uhuru became president, all the way up to 2022, we can say Parliament was really weak or muzzled in some way or another. and the judiciary became so strong, the citadel for democracy and accountability. We can always take the cue from the strong judiciary that we have today. The way the judiciary has been strong, bold, issuing orders that challenge, administrative fiats or administrative decisions that are not justified, that are not well-founded. In fact, it happened just the other day when the Communication Authority purported to give certain instructions regarding the media freedom and the High Court. If we can have such a strong institution such as the judiciary, what is it that it takes to embolden, to strengthen, to firm up the backbone of other institutions, anti-corruption body, anti-corruption agency? We have a Kenya National Commission on Human Rights that does not speak about human rights under breaches that happen on a daily basis. What does that tell you? That certain institutions have consciously made it a habit to ignore their mandate. We can reform this institution, and what I'm emphasizing is that the same way the judiciary can be strong and challenge executive decisions is the same way we can also strengthen institutions. Why is it that we have such heights and levels of corruption on a daily basis, where 1.7 billion shilling gets lost every day, and we have the EACC just sitting not 500 meters away from Parliament, not 500 meters away from the State House? What is it that is happening? It means somebody is sleeping on their job. Or it means we're not putting the right people in those positions. Or it means we are putting the right people in the wrong positions. Or the wrong positions are having the right people within their cadres.
Which in itself is
we need deeper introspection as a country. These institutional malaise and problems that we have and continue to experience need deep introspection and reimaginations of the institutions themselves, not the law. The institutions themselves.
Yes, Kitty.
I must say that Kenya is not broke, but Kenya is broken by particularly the political class, who then continuously undermine our national vitality. I agree with the Prof when he says that we cannot entirely blame the Kenyan scenario or domestic problems, that some part of the problem is international. Because, for instance, there are countries that like Brussels, countries where our people go and invest our money, London, these other places. If you look at the anti-corruption survey index, Kenya is projected to be more corrupt than some of these countries. Prof and I, we are lawyers, we know that handling stolen property is in itself a crime. So this country should be held liable as well for when the corrupt money is stolen from Kenya and invested in these jurisdictions. But then before we shift blame to these people, I am constantly guided by the wisdom of Shakespeare. When in his book, Julius Caesar, when he says, Brutus, the fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves. We must first inculcate a political culture that makes it costly to steal money from the people of Kenya through inflated infrastructure-led projects like SGR and invest that money outside Kenya. We must make it costly. When you say you are constructing dams, then you make that as an avenue for corruption and invest that money outside Kenya. If we do not have a political culture that deals with that, then all of this conversation we are engaged in will be nothing but an academic exercise. I must again say something else. That the young people, therefore, and because we must situate this conversation in its rightful context, because of some of this political culture where money is stolen and invested elsewhere, that is what we call hollowing out the state. And the young people are protesting today because of the question of how the cake in Kenya is being baked. The young people are asking themselves that are they going to be able to provide for themselves and their children in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? What type of country are they going to inherit?
like
What
like my
does the
like
education
like
system has
like like
presently
like
constituted with
yeah.
what you call the CBC?
Patrick
Is it something as a parent
Kincha,
and the young,
Patrick
and
Kincha.
the young one for that matter, like
Thank you,
Prof
Patrick
and
Kincha, for
myself,
joining.
that would you sit
Thank you
back and
guys for
say that my daughter is
joining.
going
Tap
to
tap.
school and she's getting an
Like
education that is going
I'm
to equip
young.
her to be fit
Yeah.
for the economy that is existing in the 21st century? So I think we must lay the blame where it matters. That young people, that because the political class has failed, and if you look at, because the work I do, I work at a place called South Africa as the associate on policy and risk. I consume data every day. There is a survey that the National Assembly is so unpopular that we are looking at a turnover rate of 92%. So at least 92% of the members of National Assembly and the Senate are going to go home. So then in that environment, then we must be able to make sure that the people we replace them with are not the people who are going to dance to the tune of the executive, are not going to be the people that are going to be bribed, and then we have a scenario where we have a strategic national asset like the airport being signed away in the name of development. So then we must be able to say that if we are doing development, whose development are we doing? If we are building roads, whose roads are we doing? What is the interest of building roads when the populace are wounded, are brutalized, and are traumatized? Whose hospitals are we building if the people do not even have capacity to go to those hospitals because of how they have been economically dispossessed? I think if we have that conversation, we shall have situated this conversation in its right context.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, and Prof, then that brings us to the question of then institutional failure, is that despite the current constitutional dispensation, which came with the raft of many reforms, including complete with the Bill of Rights that has widened the protection of rights and the freedoms of Kenyans. But then it's concerning, is it, when especially the institution of parliament is so unpopular and its popularity is at an all-time low if you ask any member of the public. How then do we, address this issue of the incapacitation of the existing capacity by parliamentarians themselves, just by virtue of how they are conducting themselves?
That's why when we talk about cultures are so important, even including moral cultures. Anybody who gets elected to parliament, really, people have got different agendas, different ideas, and that's why, even at times when people are voting, you can have a bill that nobody has read, nobody knows its implications, because the motivations are different. Somebody who decides to become a member of parliament goes there because of different motivations. And that's why not only at the level of parliament, it's an institutional problem across various institutions where we can call them the graveyards of ideas. Beautiful ideas, well-designed policies, well-designed guidelines, well-crafted by top technocrats. Then these things are resting in the shelves because we do not have a culture of work ethic and dedication to the values and the virtues, those fundamental tenets that are in the constitution that we speak to. People go to institutions, people assume offices with different agendas. Part of the agenda is an ethnic agenda. That's why these days, there's that constitutional requirement of 2/3 must be, diversity and so forth. But the way the system is done, the way it is arranged and choreographed is that you put people in positions, because of maybe they have an ethnic allegiance to one person or the other. It tells you that person is not going there to fulfill, to satisfactorily perform the role or the vision of that institution. It means that somebody is going to pander to certain whims, and the whims include the political appointing authority. That's why parliament cannot have the agenda of checking the executive, because one of the fundamental roles of the legislature is not only legislation but also checks and balances of oversight. They get muzzled because they get captured by particular interests, self-aggrandizement among our members of parliament. That's why our institutions fail. Graveyards of ideas, self-aggrandizement. That's why our institutions fail.
Does that point to a misunderstanding of its role or unable to comprehend the powers bestowed upon it by the Constitution to the extent that it can impeach a sitting president. How do parliamentarians certainly forget about that, or what leads to that sudden evaporation of the realization that they exercise that power?
Because people get elected to those institutions with different agenda. And agenda is, of course, personal good, personal benefit. To a certain extent, I'm not saying all those parliamentarians. Institutions do not follow the founding values and tenets, that either is in law or is in the Constitution. The reason why there is a compromise, is that when people go into certain offices, they are looking for certain interests, they're looking for certain benefits. That's why when legislatures are elected, the first thing they talk about is car allowances, car grant, mortgage here and there. They are not talking about a legislation, for instance, that will improve the lives of people in this country. How is it that we cannot have a national conversation, for instance, on the total and the continuing decay of public universities? Why are we not having that conversation? For a long time, public universities were the best, the citadels of knowledge, the fountains of knowledge. Today, you have a university that cannot even pay salaries. It is because people do not follow the founding values and visions. People have certain agendas and interests. If we cannot have a conversation, a national conversation on critical public institutions, either in parliament or anywhere else, where are we headed as a country? Wrong prioritization of agendas by our institutions and the people who serve in those institutions. And I think probably we may need to have another national conversation coming into the future on how particularly we can change, certain aspects of governance. One of them being the funding of institutions, particularly institutions that serve critical aspects of the economy. Yeah. Education is one most important of them.
Yeah.
Health is one of them. And all these things are in total decay, not because they are not enabling laws. It is because we are putting wrong people in those institutions.
Yes. And Kidi, coming to you, for convenience, the political class in this country pulls up the name of Lee Kuan Yew.
Yes.
But reading through his works and listening to his speeches, he prioritized education and the award of competence and meritocracy, and the place of then ending corruption, which is a distant position today held by the political establishment in Kenya. How has years, including of this administration, of awarding political, at the expense of political expediency, awarding incompetence led to the decay that Prof talked about of institution 1, and 2 on the part of holders of those institutions, which is a double consequence?
The place we find ourselves today is the clearest indicator that pure presidentialism is a recipe for chaos in a democracy. And I think this is an opportunity where, as a nation, we should name and shame the people who redirected the constitutional conversation in 2009 and gave us this disaster that we are living with, called pure presidentialism. And this is the case. In pure presidentialism, you have one man or one institution that is elevated above everyone else and above every institution. This institution can then begin to eat and encroach into other institutions. Look at how what we call Chapter 15 constitutions, which ideally should be independent offices and commissions, are today only independent in name. The executive has encroached, or what we call the presidency, has encroached into all these other institutions. The second thing, and it is a nature of the presidency, we say that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You see that statement in absolute power corrupting absolutely in how we have exercised power under pure presidentialism. When President Kenyatta comes in, and we must give credit to the leadership of CORD then as it was constituted. Because in 2014, when they called for national dialogue, it was because Jubilee had started to make blunders. Part of those blunders then were around public finance. Remember, our National Assembly decided to amend the Constitution through an act of Parliament, Public Finance Management Act. Article 50, subsection 7, which then allowed the Minister for Finance to start spending money borrowed before that money hits the consolidated fund.
That is, and Eurobond came in.
Yes, and Eurobond came in, and they misused Eurobond, and that is how...
A deliberate plowing of the ground.
Very good, yes.
For proper harvesting.
Yes. Actually, they brought the ground to harvest.
Yes.
And harvesting here is the corruption that we witnessed under Eurobond. So then this brings us to another facet of presidentialism and absolute power corrupting absolutely. That in pure presidentialism, you see exercise of power and leadership through authoritarianism rather than a dialogic leadership. In a dialogic leadership, as Prof is saying, that how comes that today we have public universities collapsing and nobody is speaking about them? It is because the people who attempt to speak are then called anti-government forces by the empty heads hired by those in power to defend this regime. It is not, there is no problem in defending a government. But if you do so unintelligently, you put the hopes, the fortune of the entire country in jeopardy. Because, for instance, if we had a problem with the HELP program as it was, and therefore we had to come with a new funding model. That new funding model, we did not allow the people of Kenya to give alternative views. And anyone who gave an alternative views, we had, particularly the bloggers, and this regime has, specialized in hiring bloggers. Some of them not very much informed. In calling everyone who had an alternative view as an anti-government force. You only use that term anti-government force in a place where the state has collapsed completely and there is a civil war and there is government is trying to claim its legitimacy through use of force and the monopoly of force for that matter, and therefore other forces are called anti-government forces.
Yeah. But
in a democracy, we must allow exchange of ideas. So let me rest this point. In failure to use, in our insistence on authoritarianism as opposed to dialogic leadership, we have then made it very costly for alternative views to come to nourish our political management. As we come here today, and as we mark Sabasaba, we ask this government that it must embrace dialogue. But when that is happening, as the people and as part of this process of Sabasaba and the Gen Z movement, we must convene a national convention assembly. And this national convention assembly must bring in the three actors I mentioned earlier. And those three actors, that is the young people working together with academia, so the young people in institutions of higher learning, the young people in political parties, the professors, the political parties, faith-based organizations. Let us meet in Naivasa, let us meet in Bomas, let us meet in Kasarani, let us say what are our national problems, what are the three national issues we want to give priority. So then let us subsequently continuing this engagement of political pressure, making sure but saying that we want this achieved. Because the political class has failed to lead, we the people must help them lead. Thank you.
Prof, if you look at the response by the state, for instance, in the 1990s, publications were banned, printing presses disabled, writers were jailed, some went into hiding under the Mwakenya movement before multipartism, including Raila Odinga, and of course the politicians. And today we have seen the Communications Authority last week banning live broadcast. It seems the playbook is the same and the tendency, but ideally we have changed our architecture of governance. How then do we reconcile all this and make it smooth at once?
Institutional transformation, I think, takes a great deal of time. But I think there's a way in which also the way, how the law is implemented depends really on the person who sits in that position, how they understand it. So it's really understandings of law. But I do know that, political regimes, because a government is led by a political regime, and a political regime is interested always interested in self-survival, at least serving the period for which it is elected. And then the survivorship or the survival of a political regime must be, it must be shepherded. So when you talk about a communication authority, that's a shepherd. When you talk about, or any other government institution, is to enable the government to exist as it serves the people. So those administrators who are in those positions may understand the law differently. Okay? And they will always understand it, particularly if one is a direct political appointee. They will always understand the law from the perspective of he who pays the piper, calls the tune. That's really the problem we have in this country. It's not the problem of law, it is the problem of the implementer of the law, their own basic understandings and the misunderstandings of the law and its provisions, how they interpret that law. That's why we have the problem of the way things change, the way they remain the same.
Okay.
So that in this day and age, one can still rise up and go back and switch off televisions, things that were proscribed, centuries ago, even in the West. So, but the basic problem we have in this country is not that of a pure presidential system, as my colleague has said.
Can I just pause you, Prof. Proceed? Let me get hold of Crispin Otieno, who joins us from Kisii County. Good afternoon to you, Crispin. And what can you tell us on Sabasaba from the county of Kisii?
Well, a very good afternoon, Ayub. We are in Kisii town side, and as you can see in our screens, this is currently what is happening along Kisii-Kisumu Road. For the last 30 or so minutes, we've witnessed a fierce exchange between demonstrators and the police. Just if my camera person can just show you where the police are. This is what's happening right here. Kisii, for the past 30 minutes, as I said, it has come under heavy gunfire. And right now, they're trying to repulse protesters who have lit bonfires across several entrances to Kisii town center. As you can see from the far end, the youth are still hurling stones towards where we are, where the anti-riot police have pitched camp. And this is what is happening. It was really chaotic. We've witnessed heavy gunfire and running battles within Kisii town. And I just want to come much closer to what is happening in this area. The police, the anti-riot police are trying to put out the fire along this stretch. And this is not the only point where we are witnessing this. We've also seen several parts along just next to Kisii Morgue. They barricaded the road there along Kisii Darajambili Road. We've also witnessed and seen quite a number of bonfires lit along that stretch as well. So in youth, they are saying that they're calling for change, even as the country marks 35th Sabasaba in Kisii, and of course across several counties. They are saying that they want a change in terms of the country's governance, and that's the reason why they decided to come out in large numbers. Ayub, as you can hear from the background, there's still heavy bangs of gunshots, and we're trying to move much closer to where the action is, and just to paint for you the picture and paint our viewers the picture how the situation is looking like currently in Kisii town. You can see several shops are still closed down for the better part of Monday. As you can see from this end, quite a number of youth are taking cover just to ensure that they're safe, while the majority are also trying to engage officers within the town center as they mark Madaraka Day in Kisii town. Yes, as you can see from the far end, the road has been blocked by the youth, the angry youth. So we've also witnessed quite a number being arrested by the anti-riot police and taken to Kisii police station, which is just about a kilometer from where we are. And we've also seen quite a number are being taken to Kisii Level 6 Hospital for sustaining injuries after two groups clashed within the town center, Ayub. This is how it is looking like along this stretch, Kisii-Kisumu Road. And then from this end, you can see still no one is allowed to pass this route, especially those using their motor vehicles, because it is impassable for now. And it's moving all the way to Dorajambili. It's about 2 kilometers from where we are. So this is how the situation has been for the past 30 minutes. Initially, it was really peaceful until when we started to witness running battles between youth, lighting bonfires in several roads within Kisii town center. And for now, they've been repulsed to several parts within Kisii town center. But some are also saying they're still going to ensure that they make their way back to our town center. But there are some who are being told to unblock the roads. Yes, this is how it's looking like. It's really a chaotic scene within the town center, Ayub, and we'll try to get hold of some people just to talk to them and get to hear what they're talking about with this kind of situation within the town. And we also Kisii County Police Commander Ronald Kirui, working alongside several police officers trying to quell the youth, tell them to stop, lighting bonfires in several parts within Kisii town center. And after that, we've seen some who are not really adhering to that order. They're not adhering to that order. But yeah, this is how it is now looking like. People are still stranded. Those who are trying to make their way out of Kisii town center, and they're not able to do so. Along Kisii-Kilgoris Road, we also witnessed a fierce exchange between demonstrators and the police. There was a running battle, and that particular stretch was also blocked by the angry youth. And we'll be able to keep you posted, Ayub, as these events unfold in Kisii town. And from here, we also try to access other roads getting to Kisii town center just to monitor how the situation is looking like, and we'll be able to link up with you, of course, in our subsequent updates. Ayub.
Thank you, Chris, much appreciated, and good afternoon for the feedback and the assessment you have given us there from the county of Kisii. Coming to you, ideally then we are seeing the response from the state, and it appears that the political biology of Kanu hasn't faded off over time, and this response, the behavior within the political gallery appears to be one that borders on what happened in 1990. How do we then end this trait of the high-handedness and the violence meted on Kenyans who are exercising their freedoms?
In my view, from where I sit, I think it is our inability to handle transition. And the transition here is between the administrative colonial superstructure that was erected during colonialism for sole purpose of extraction, and how we have reproduced it instead of killing it. And I will give you an example. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 envisaged that we would quickly dismantle provincial administration and come up with a model that accords with the Constitution of Kenya 2010. What we have seen to date is the reproduction that we have reproduced that provincial administration and sustained it. Today you hear of conversation about giving chiefs policemen and such like things. But as we are giving them policemen, look at how the training we've continued to give our policemen. It is a training, it is a philosophy that is embedded in brutalizing the people. So then the brutalization you see is the colonial mentality that we have not moved away from. The only thing that can move us from that colonial mentality is when we get to a place where, as a country, we will say we want to have a political institution and not an administrative edifice. President Kenyatta failed horribly in 2013 when he was elected, and the bulk of the corruption we witnessed under President Kenyatta, and when I say President Kenyatta, I mean Uhuru, it is because of how he sustained that administrative superstructure whose net effect was to hollow out the state. And I will give you an example. Kenya, we train doctors every year. Many of them graduate. And they are qualified to treat the people of Kenya. President Kenyatta, in his wisdom or lack of it, then decides to go ahead and bring in doctors from Cuba. And at the same time, when he's bringing doctors from Cuba, our Kenya is not like that all our Kenyan doctors were employed. And if those who are employed were not having the best of, what you'd call the best working conditions. So it is under President Kenyatta when we saw him even turning against the union leadership of the doctors, KMPDU. And our brother Luga was, and his leadership were taken to jail. So when President William Ruto came in, and there was an expectation, almost a legitimate one. I call it almost legitimate because William Ruto did not say this. This is for the people who are now looking at him and observing his history, that he would come in and become the president of action. Part of the action that the people expected is that he would dismantle this oppressive system that in some way had raised him. But you see, biblically, we are told that Moses grew up in the house of Pharaoh, but then he went back and, because of that understanding, helped get children of Israel out of that bondage.
Yeah, dismantling the very same kingdom.
Yes. Yes. So we had expected that William Ruto would be a Moses.
Okay, thank you.
And so let me...
I'll allow you to finish.
Okay.
Allow me to hold off. Thank you. Gatete Njoroge, who is in Zimmerman. He has been monitoring the situation around Thika Road and that area. Good afternoon to you again, Gatete. What can you tell us of the movements that you have made?
Yes, Ayub, a few minutes ago, we were coming live from Roysambu area where police were battling protesters. Those are the guys who had walked all the way from Githurai, but at the moment there's a team of police officers. Where we are, Ayub, exactly, we are at Quickmart, Zimmerman. And what was happening, Ayub, is that while we were at Roysambu, we received reports that some of those guys who were battling police officers had tried to access Quickmart supermarket. If my cameraman Sean can just show you, this is the kind of destruction that is being witnessed here at Quickmart supermarket, Roysambu. If you can see, basically these were glasses. Those young men were throwing at the supermarket. As you can see, some items here that are burnt. If my cameraman can show you, there are some books here. If you can see, those are burnt books. We have, we even have a clothing. I can see a cape over there. I hope I can see a cape. There's this place where when a shopper comes, he's able to leave his items. I hope you can see, my cameraman can just show you, those protesters were able to push it over as they were trying to access this place. At the moment, we have not been able to get information if they were able to access, but we understand that the team of police officers who have come here, they are going to access the supermarket basically to check instruction or if there are people who are able to access inside the supermarket, and if there are some items which were stolen. But if you can see outside here, my cameraman can show you, there is a gas cylinder here. Maybe my cameraman can show you. There's a gas cylinder. There are some trees, plastic trees. We can see stones that those young men were using to throw at Quickmart supermarket. We can see the police officers are trying to gain access. So we'll just try and show you the pictures of police officers that are trying to get access. We hear where they are standing. there are some of those young men tried to gain access to the supermarket through this particular route, and so the police officers have been brought to access this place. If my cameraman can show you, there is also a crowd here. These are just residents, peaceful residents, who have also just come to witness what is happening around this place. So also around us we have residents who live around this place who have received information that there's something happening here, and they have just arrived. So what is happening at the moment is that there's a contingent of police officers who have arrived here, Ayub, and I understand they are talking to one of the officials at this specific supermarket so that they can be allowed in and just to check if maybe there are some protesters who are able to gain entrance, but maybe they are holed up inside. So at the moment, Ayub, we are just waiting to see what will happen. But as you can see from the pictures coming live from here, is that there is a new team of police officers who have arrived, and we are just waiting for the operation to take place. This is actually, Zimmerman is one of the areas which has been hardly hit by demonstrations that were being held today. Actually, you cannot access the side of Kahawa West from here because those guys, the people who are protesting, they have put stones all along that stretch, and so no vehicle can access this particular road. Even from where we are, we can hear sounds of police lobbing tear gas at some of those protesters, but that's about 500 meters from where we are, Ayub. But at the moment, the action is here at Quickmart Zimmerman, where police officers want to access Quickmart supermarket that is in Zimmerman to be able to just access the damage, but also see if there are a number of protesters who could have accessed this particular supermarket, and we want to know what will transpire from here. So Ayub, it is a kind of a tense situation, yes, but we are waiting to see what will happen next. We have residents from this particular area. We have residents from this particular area who have also camped here. They're just basically looking at what police officers are doing. At the moment, there's an official from Quickmart Supermarket Zimmerman who is opening for the police officers, and so we are waiting for them. We also have police officers in place.
There is Gatete Njoroge and the live pictures coming to you from Kisii County of police taking into custody a protester there. And Crispin Otieno is following up on that. And the arrest made here, as you can see on our screens, the live pictures coming to you from Kisii County, and the report live done by Gatete Njoroge from Zimmerman as he keeps an eye on what's happening along Thika Road and the roads that have been blocked by security agencies as the country woke up to the 35th year of the Sabasaba celebrations to mark when Kenya became a multi-party democracy, and the arrest made by police, as you can see on your screen, from the county of Kisii. Crispin Otieno is for us on that. Yes, Kid, you had a point.
Yes. So I was saying that we have failed to transition, and we have continued to manage Kenya 60 years later the very same way the colonialists designed it. And that has held us back with grave consequences. Because Prof speaks eloquently about what a good country we are, but then in the same vein and breath, what he points out as the things making us good countries are either so far back behind in terms of when you talk about access to free primary education. I don't think education is free anymore. The capitation, if you look at even the capitation, it is always sent late to schools. Parents are forced to fork out money. School administrators are sometimes forced to get into some, local arrangement with parents, so that parents, pay extra money just to sustain children in school. In a proper society, and look at our near psychotic appetite for, being a country of small things. That every time we have an opportunity to make a big decision towards a specific direction, we prevaricate around that idea and do small things and contain it, and when the pressure has passed, then we go back to our old ways. We saw it when the Jubilee administration came in 2013. Look at the small things President Kenyatta engaged himself in, rather than making bold strategic moves that would have made Kenya the capital of Africa. When President William Ruto came in, particularly last year when the Gen Zs gave him an opportunity to redirect the country towards pivot the country towards a different direction, many commentators out there are saying that President Ruto again prevaricated. He engaged in small PR exercises and missed that opportunity. So I think that the moment we are able to transition our politically from an administrative structure to a political order and abandon this near psychotic appetite for doing small things, I think we will now be a good country that Prof talks about.
Yeah, and Prof then was 2024, a time that presented itself for the course correction of the country's deep-seated problems, and was that opportunity squandered?
Yes, I do agree that 2024 was a bellwether moment, a moment for great transformation that the government, was presented to the government, political leaders, political administration, but they have squandered it in the sense that they do not understand the roots, the nature of the kind of agitation that came about, its vision and what it seeks to achieve, and who actually are the leaders. This government has to understand that the kind of transformational change that the country is actually looking for is not coming from the older generation. It is coming from the younger generation that wants a new future, a better future for themselves. And it is this generation that has got to be satisfied, so that when we are formulating policies, formulating laws, coming up with government programs, it should be directed to their own benefit. And I think this is something that probably the political administration has to go and deeply internalize, that whose interests should we satisfy between now up to the time that this government term is ending. It must be the young people. It must be the young people who need a particular way or a particular mode of economic redistribution. A good number of graduates are coming out of the universities with enormous potential, but that potential is not matched by opportunities. So that their productive capacities are not sufficiently being engaged. And when we have such a huge population, that does not enjoy the economic benefits within our country, it presents a serious and a fundamental problem. There is another level of fundamental problem that probably none of us has touched on. The greatest problem we have in this country is not that of the nature of political administration that they have, whether it's presidential, parliamentary. The problem we have in this country is that of accountability. That is the first problem. The fact that we cannot properly put leaders to account, either politically or during election time. There is also a problem of tolerance, the permissiveness of quite a great deal of moral ills in our country. One of the things is corruption. That on the one hand, when somebody is speaking in public, they disapprove of corruption.
Yeah.
In private, they approve of corruption. They worship the wealth that these self-seekers have obtained illicitly. They do not report the illicitly obtained wealth, and they do know where such wealth. How can we have such a society that approbates and reprobates at the same time? How can we have a society that approves that which it has disapproved? Okay? Because leaders who speak loudly in public gatherings about how to fight corruption, about how ethnicity is a bad thing. But when it comes to appointing leaders, you always look at it from a political prism, from an ethnic prism. Where is the problem? The problem is the wider societal problem. The fact that, we have warped values that we really do not speak about in public, and we do not want to change them at any given.
But then, Prof, how then have we failed abjectly? The same pointed out by CJ Kenani David Maraga, the same pointed by
of shipping young people of Kenya to go and do many of the jobs in the Middle East and all these other places. Part of why I disagree with that policy is because Kenya does not get return on investment. I mean, it is laughable that to educate our